What happens when a dream home turns into a royal battlefield? Meghan Markle, once obsessed with a property in Windsor, now watches as Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge, effortlessly claims it as her own. But this isn't just about a house. It's about status, perception, and the quiet royal moves that are driving Meghan crazy. Want to know why Forest Lodge has become Meghan's worst nightmare? Stick around, because the story behind this property is way more than you'd expect. Forest Lodge isn't just a house, it's a statement. Nestled within the grandeur of Windsor Great Park, this sprawling estate is the epitome of luxury, featuring serene lakes, sprawling rose gardens, tennis courts, and 8 massive bedrooms. For anyone, it would be the dream home. But what makes this property even more captivating isn't just its size or its beauty. It's the fact that William and Catherine didn't rely on royal allowances or public funding to acquire it. No taxpayer money, no Netflix royalties, just cold, hard cash from their personal pockets. This move is more than just a new address. It's a carefully calculated step in the royal power game. By paying for the house out of their own pockets, the Wales family has shifted the narrative. They're not just royalty, they're relatable, practical, and above all, untouchable. It's a quiet flex, the kind that makes headlines without ever having to say a word. But for Meghan, this wasn't just any house. Forest Lodge symbolized everything she once dreamed of: grace, status, and a place in the heart of the royal legacy. And yet, instead of moving into the estate herself, she's left to watch as Catherine strolls through its gardens, perfectly poised, as if the crown jewel had always been meant for her. Before the world knew of Meghan and Harry's departure from royal duties, there were whispers about their ambitions to settle in Forest Lodge. It wasn't just a house, it was the house. Meghan reportedly had her eye on the estate for years, envisioning it as the ultimate symbol of her success within the royal fold, the kind of place where she and Harry could sip organic tea on the back patio, away from the media frenzy, while secretly plotting their next big move. In fact, the couple even toured Forest Lodge during their time as senior royals, likely imagining themselves settling into the luxurious setting, a perfect backdrop for their ever-growing public profile. The thought of claiming such an iconic estate wasn't just about owning property, it was about solidifying their place at the top of the royal hierarchy. For Meghan, this would have been the ultimate symbol of arriving, in the royal world, the real "I made it" moment. But when the news broke that Catherine and William would be moving in, the reality of it all hit hard. Forest Lodge wasn't just a home to Meghan, it was a dream deferred, a vision crushed by a turn of fate. The very house she had once set her sights on was now no longer a possibility, and that sting, according to insiders, went deep. It wasn't just about the house, it was about everything that had slipped from her grasp, everything that Catherine had quietly and effortlessly claimed. The news of Catherine's move into Forest Lodge didn't just land with a thud, it hit Meghan like a punch to the gut. Insiders claim that Meghan's reaction wasn't one of calm acceptance or even quiet disappointment. It was reportedly a full-on obsession, one that grew more intense with each passing day. Every detail of the estate became an object of her scrutiny, from square footage to furniture upgrades, even the modifications to the fireplace. Nothing was spared from her analysis. Meghan's focus on Forest Lodge soon morphed into something darker, an all-consuming bitterness that seeped into every conversation, every thought. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was supposed to be her win. Forest Lodge wasn't just another royal home. It was supposed to be her symbol of success, her personal victory in the battle for royal relevance. But instead, Catherine, without any fanfare, had claimed it. The contrast was almost too much for Meghan to bear. She, who had once dreamed of this estate, was now forced to watch from the sidelines as Catherine stepped in without so much as a whisper of controversy. And Harry. According to sources, he wasn't helping the situation. His frustration seemed to mirror Meghan's own, as he reportedly spent his days walking around Montecito, muttering about how it should have been them. "They always get everything," he allegedly said, keeping a mental tally of who was winning in this unspoken race. In the midst of it all, Forest Lodge became more than just a property. It became the symbol of everything Meghan felt she had lost. As Meghan stewed in her frustration, one thing became painfully clear. The contrast between her public image and Catherine's was becoming more glaring by the day. While Meghan's every move seemed to generate headlines, often filled with controversy or passive-aggressive undertones, Catherine had managed to do the unthinkable. She moved into Forest Lodge with zero drama. No interviews, no leaks to the press, and certainly no elaborate PR campaigns. Just quiet elegance, grace, and a seamless transition into her new home. The public couldn't get enough of it. The image of Catherine strolling through the pristine gardens of Forest Lodge, holding a cup of tea with her children in tow, painted a picture of modern royalty, flawless, composed, and above all, untouchable. In stark contrast, Meghan's recent efforts to control her narrative seemed to fall flat. Her TikTok videos and media outbursts were no match for Catherine's understated presence, which only added fuel to Meghan's growing bitterness. It wasn't just about the property anymore. It was about how the public saw them. Catherine's approval rating soared as she quietly renovated her new home, her every move celebrated for its dignity and class. Meghan, on the other hand, found herself caught in an endless loop of public frustration, defending herself against accusations and online critiques. Catherine had become the shining example of royal decorum, while Meghan's attempts to redefine modern royalty through drama and spectacle seemed more out of place than ever. The real sting for Meghan, insiders say, wasn't just the fact that Forest Lodge was no longer hers. It was the way Catherine had claimed it without a single headline or a tear in sight, and that quiet victory. It was a narrative Meghan could never seem to wrestle away. At its core, Forest Lodge is much more than just a luxury home. It's a powerful symbol. For Catherine and William, the move into this sprawling estate wasn't about flaunting wealth or status. It was a masterstroke in royal evolution, a quiet declaration that they were both moving forward and embodying the very values the monarchy is supposed to represent: tradition, stability, and grace. With no fanfare or media circus, they simply bought the house with their own money, renovated it to fit their family, and moved in. It was a statement of their self-sufficiency and their ability to thrive without the constant noise of public scrutiny. For Meghan, however, Forest Lodge became something else entirely, a mirror reflecting everything she felt she had lost. As she watched Catherine step into the estate with seemingly effortless elegance, the deeper implications began to set in. This wasn't just about real estate. It was about a missed opportunity, an image of success that she had once imagined for herself but was now claimed by someone else. Meghan had spent so much time trying to carve out her own version of modern royalty, but seeing Catherine effortlessly embraced by the public for what Meghan had once dreamed of felt like a punch to the gut. What made this even harder to swallow was the sheer simplicity of it all. William and Catherine's transition to Forest Lodge was seamless, with no dramatic headlines or PR stunts to carry the story. The estate wasn't just about bricks and mortar, it was about perception. And in that perception, Meghan couldn't escape the sting of being left behind. Forest Lodge wasn't just a property, it was the perfect reflection of everything Meghan felt she could have been, but ultimately wasn't. And the more she obsessed over it, the more the reality sank in. The crown jewel had slipped away without a single drama, leaving her in its wake. As the months passed and the dust settled around Forest Lodge, Meghan's frustration turned into something more strategic. She wasn't just sulking, she was planning. Insiders claim that Meghan began brainstorming new content ideas that somehow tied back to her lost dream. Titles like "The Royal Home That Got Away" or "How I Almost Became the Queen of Windsor" began circulating within her team. She reportedly pitched Netflix miniseries ideas that centered around the heartache of losing out on such a prestigious property, weaving a narrative of real estate heartbreak and unfulfilled royal dreams. The more Meghan thought about it, the more it seemed like Forest Lodge had become the symbol of everything she wanted but couldn't have. But it wasn't just about the house itself, it was about reclaiming her narrative. Meghan, once the darling of royal tabloids, now found herself on the outside, watching as Catherine effortlessly embodied the very image Meghan had been chasing. And so, in an attempt to regain control, Meghan started crafting new storylines, positioning herself as the modern royal voice, the one who had to reinvent herself in the face of public rejection. One idea that allegedly floated around involved a tongue-in-cheek comparison of palaces versus mansions, where Meghan could juxtapose her California mansion against the regal estates of the British monarchy. The goal wasn't just to tell her story, it was to flip the script, to reframe the traditional royal narrative, and make herself the leading figure of a new era. But here's the problem. The more Meghan tried to steer the conversation, the more she seemed to push the public away. The media, once captivated by her every move, started to notice the pattern. Every time Catherine made a public appearance, Meghan responded with noise, whether it was a tweet, a podcast, or some new content on social media. Instead of reclaiming her image, Meghan's strategy started to feel like a desperate attempt to keep her name in the headlines. Forest Lodge had become her battleground, but it was one that she could never quite win. Catherine, meanwhile, continued to stay silent, and in doing so, kept winning the narrative war. The more Meghan tried to rewrite her story, the more the public was drawn to the quiet strength of Catherine's actions. It was a game Meghan couldn't seem to play, and the irony wasn't lost on her. While she fought for attention, Catherine effortlessly held the crown. The deeper Meghan dug into her attempts to control the narrative, the more Forest Lodge became not just a symbol of her lost opportunity, but a painful reminder of the power dynamics at play. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It had grown into a symbol of everything Meghan had wanted and lost: the status, the grace, the quiet victory that Catherine had claimed without ever needing to make a fuss. Forest Lodge had become a mirror reflecting Meghan's failure to fit into the mold of the royal family's ideal. No matter how much she tried to inject drama into the situation, the true story was simple. Catherine had the crown jewel, and she had it without the theatrics. In the long run, it wasn't the size of the estate that Meghan obsessed over, it was what it represented. Forest Lodge wasn't just a home. It was a perfect encapsulation of everything Meghan had envisioned for herself in the royal spotlight. A home like that would have given her the status she craved, the admiration she desired, and the respect she felt she deserved. But instead, she was left with Montecito, a sprawling mansion that seemed more like an afterthought in comparison. The contrast between the two properties became too much for Meghan to bear, especially when she saw how the public had embraced Catherine's effortless journey to Forest Lodge. What made it worse was the fact that William and Catherine didn't need to do anything to earn their admiration. They simply lived their lives. The Welsh family had taken this major step forward, and the public, hungry for a royal family that stayed above the fray, showered them with praise. Meanwhile, Meghan found herself stuck in a cycle of trying to spin her own story, but it just didn't carry the same weight. Forest Lodge had become the ultimate symbol of what Meghan couldn't have, but more than that, it was the embodiment of her struggle to find a place in a royal narrative that she could never truly belong to. And the more she tried to battle it out in the media, the more she seemed to confirm the very thing she feared most: Catherine had won. Not because she fought for it, but because she had chosen to remain silent, and in that silence, Catherine had gained everything Meghan had once hoped for. As the months went by, it became increasingly clear that Forest Lodge wasn't just a lost dream for Meghan. It was a battle that couldn't be won. No amount of Netflix pitches, social media content, or public statements could undo the damage. Meghan had tried to rewrite the narrative, but it was becoming impossible to ignore the quiet power that Catherine wielded. The more Meghan raged against her own feelings of inadequacy, the more the world seemed to embrace the calm, dignified presence of Catherine and William. And therein lies the twist. Catherine wasn't even trying to compete. She wasn't chasing the headlines or responding to Meghan's every move. She was simply living her life. Every step she took in Forest Lodge seemed effortless, as if it was always meant to be hers. Meanwhile, Meghan's attempts to play the game, to control the narrative, only seemed to push her further away from the kind of royal image she had always wanted. What really stung, though, was the realization that it wasn't the house that had slipped away. It was the public's perception. Catherine had quietly secured the kind of royal respect and admiration Meghan once sought without a single dramatic headline or public outburst. The real victory here wasn't in the luxury of Forest Lodge itself, but in the way Catherine had maintained a narrative of grace and quiet strength. And as Meghan watched from afar, it became clear it wasn't just the house that had been taken. It was the crown of public approval, effortlessly claimed and worn with dignity. For Meghan, Forest Lodge had become a symbol of everything she had fought to control, but ultimately couldn't. It was the final, painful reminder that no amount of drama could change the one thing that truly mattered in the royal game perception. And in that game, Catherine had won without ever needing to say a word. In the end, it wasn't about Forest Lodge or even about who got the house. It was about something far more powerful: perception. Catherine's seamless move into the estate didn't just represent royal luxury, it was the embodiment of everything Meghan had been striving for. The quiet dignity, the effortless grace, and the public admiration that Catherine received for her new home weren't due to grand gestures or media campaigns. They were simply the result of living life without drama, without spectacle. And in that silence, Catherine had managed to capture the very essence of what Meghan had always wanted, the image of a royal who was respected, loved, and celebrated for simply being who they were. What made this all the more painful for Meghan was that she had spent so much of her time trying to fight against the royal mold, attempting to reshape the narrative to fit her vision of modern royalty. She had wanted the crown, the attention, and the influence, but in her struggle to force it, she only seemed to push it further away. Meanwhile, Catherine was doing the opposite. She wasn't chasing anything. She wasn't trying to be the center of attention. And yet, in doing so, she had effortlessly claimed what Meghan wanted most, the admiration of the public. For Meghan and Harry, the battle is still ongoing. They continue to fight for relevance in a world that seems to have moved on from their royal past. The more they try to shape their story, the more the public seems drawn to the quiet, powerful image of William and Catherine's life. It's a painful realization, but one that is hard to ignore. Meghan's envy of Forest Lodge isn't just about the property itself. It's about everything it represents: status, acceptance, and the kind of royal life she thought she could create, but ultimately couldn't. In the end, it wasn't the house that Meghan lost. It was the narrative. And in the quiet, graceful triumph of Catherine and William's move, it became clear the real win in the royal game isn't in power, possessions, or public statements. It's in the perception of being above the fray, of holding your ground without ever needing to fight for it. And right now, that's a game Meghan can't seem to win.